I recognize the member for Rosthern-Shellbrook.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure for me to rise here today in response to the speech from the throne that was given last week. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to begin with, as traditional with many members in this Assembly, with a few thank yous. First of all, in our constituency office in Rosthern-Shellbrook, we have Ms. Sally Fitch, who is a constituency assistant there, in the eyes and the ears and really the voice, and thankfully some days the face of our constituency office to all the constituents of Rosthern-Shellbrook. And I appreciate her effort and her genuine nature that she approaches each and every point of contact with constituents in Rosthern-Shellbrook. So thank you very much, Sally. So also I'd like to take a moment just to thank all of the staff in this beautiful provincial capital building that we work in, whether it be the caucus staff on both sides, the security staff, the House staff, the committee staff, Mr. Speaker. The effort and the genuine way that they show up and do their work so efficiently each and every day is greatly appreciated and helps us with our daily tasks. And as well, Mr. Speaker, I would like to take a moment to thank my family, as many in here have done. Firstly, with my children, Carter and Taryn. My son is at university now, so I don't see him too much as he's moved out of the house during the winters and he returns home for the summers. And my daughter, who is in grade 10 back in Shellbrook, and I know I miss volleyball games and dance competitions, and I missed a speech last night that she gave, Mr. Speaker, in preparation for the Student Leadership Council provincial conference that they're hosting in Shellbrook. And I wasn't able to make that, but I am going to get it by email or YouTube here later today, and I look forward to it. I think I probably miss spending time with her more than she missed spending it with me. She's quite content with the amount of time that we spend together, but I do thank her for what I think is a sacrifice. And my wife, Krista, what else do you say but thank you for allowing me to take the time to represent the constituents of Rosthern-Shellbrook in this capital. So thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, before I begin with some comments to the speech from the throne that was delivered here last week, I would like to provide a little context on the vision of the speech from the throne, and more specifically its theme of meeting the challenges of growth. In the spring of 2012, Mr. Speaker, about a year and a half ago, as the legislature closed, the Premier asked us as government MLAs, as we went out into our constituencies and met with constituents and community groups and community leadership groups, Mr. Speaker, that we inquire with them as to the growth that has happened in our province, and inquire with them as to the positive effects of this growth, but also as to the challenges that they view that may be arising with that growth. Well, Mr. Speaker, this consultation was extensive and it was thorough, and the result of this consultation by all government MLAs was the forming and the ultimate release last fall of the Saskatchewan Plan for Growth, the Vision 2020 and beyond. And Mr. Speaker, the Saskatchewan Plan for Growth states, and I quote, identifies principles, goals and actions to ensure that Saskatchewan is capturing the opportunities and meeting the challenges of a growing province. And Mr. Speaker, this is not a narrow plan that sets our province's goals in one sector or one ministry, but it's a broad, multidisciplinary plan with very specific goals. And many of these goals are centered around fostering growth in our province. And Mr. Speaker, growth, the purpose of that growth is not growth for growth's sake, but growth to secure a better quality of life for all Saskatchewan residents. Mr. Speaker, I am not aware of another recent government document that has been created with such a vast and thorough consultation process, or a document that so precisely sets out the plan for growth for the province. The Saskatchewan Plan for Growth is authored by the people of Saskatchewan, and its guidance by the very people that we in this chamber represent, and a vision that this government will move to realize. Mr. Speaker, budgets and announcements, as well as the speech from the throne last week, are rungs in the ladder, if you will, in providing a framework to achieve the goals that were stated in the Saskatchewan Plan for Growth. Mr. Speaker, with the growth of our economy comes challenges with regards to transportation. Transportation in Saskatchewan is predominantly on our provincial highways as well as our urban and rural road systems. Mr. Speaker, in the constituency of Rosthern-Shellbrook, we have recently observed the resurfacing of Highway number 40, as well as upgrades to the access road into the community of Laird. And Mr. Speaker, just this past Friday, my colleagues from Prince Albert and Batoche were at the completion, not the opening announcement, but the completion announcement of the twinning of Highway number 11 from Saskatoon to Prince Albert. And Mr. Speaker, from the southeast part of the Rosthern-Shellbrook constituency, I cannot express to you how it has been expressed to me by constituents in that area, how this road and the twinning of this highway has made not only transportation easier for our export commodities, but also the highway is much safer. We always must understand there's much more to accomplish in the way of highway investment, and it's all too important in an exporting economy such as Saskatchewan. And I would, however, be remiss if I did not remind members of the estimated $1 billion highway infrastructure deficit that this government inherited in 2007 due to lack of appropriate investment in prior years. Mr. Speaker, spending on highways has increased 76% in the last 6 years over the 6 years prior, and that includes a $500 million investment this year. This translates into almost $50 million has been spent in the constituency of Rosthern-Shellbrook in the last 6 years, Mr. Speaker. Housing challenges have been discussed in this chamber, but more importantly, those same housing challenges have been discussed in our communities. Expansions of the Life Lease program and broadening the Head Start on a Home program to improve housing options in Saskatchewan are options that Saskatchewan people have asked for and this government is addressing. Expanding the housing supply by adding or rejuvenating 12,600 units and backing this up with $344 million is a very ambitious goal, Mr. Speaker, and it's another initiative that was requested and will be delivered on by this government. In Rosthern-Shellbrook, the Saskatchewan Housing Corporation consists of 14 housing authorities governing 327 units. It's through the appreciated efforts of these volunteers that we are able to offer the housing options that we have. Mr. Speaker, this fall, on behalf of our minister, I had the opportunity to join with Chief Cliff DePeasum of the Muskeg Lake Cree Nations in the grand opening of 5 homes in the community of Blaine Lake. This was a joint project between Muskeg Lake First Nations and the Saskatchewan Housing Corporation. Later in the day, Chief DePeasum and myself also had the opportunity to turn sod for an additional 3 homes in another joint project. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank Chief Cliff DePeasum and the community of Muskeg Lake Cree Nations for their joint partnership in this important housing initiative. Mr. Speaker, I'd be remiss if I had the opportunity to stand in this assembly and speak, and I did not take that opportunity to speak about rural health care, as Rosthern-Shellbrook is a very rural constituency. And I do have some comments I would like to make on health care, but prior to that, I do have a couple of statements that I would like to enter in on the record here. And first I quote is from the September 3rd edition of the 2010, the local paper where I live, the Shellbrook Chronicle, and it goes such as this, Mr. Speaker, and I quote, "As you're no doubt aware, your area includes one of 13 Saskatchewan communities to have its new long-term care facility or hospital cancelled in the Wall government's 2010 budget. And that's signed by NDP health critic Ms. Judy Junior. Mr. Speaker, a year later, Ms. Junior went on to state in the Southwest Booster in August of 2011, the 13 communities who were promised newer renovated facilities in the 2009 budget have yet to see those promises fulfilled. They're still dreaming almost 3 years later." End of quote. Mr. Speaker, it's my experience that a dream disappears when you wake up. And families and communities across this province that had ambitious goals to replace or rebuild those 13 facilities, that was never a dream to them, Mr. Speaker. It definitely wasn't. The people in the area of Shellbrook were not dreaming, Mr. Speaker, and I doubt whether the other 12 communities were as well. At the very time of that NDP health critics' letters to the editor, Mr. Speaker, the very people in those 13 communities and the NDP dismissed them as dreaming, were working with their respective health regions, the government officials, and different fundraising groups within their respective communities, all in the effort to build their respective facility, one of the 13, Mr. Speaker. At the time I read those letters to the editor from the NDP health critic, I could not understand why she would refer to the communities and individuals' goals as dreams. And I thought about it, Mr. Speaker, and the more I thought about it, the more it started to make sense. And to the NDP, those always were dreams, Mr. Speaker. The NDP could do nothing but dream of building long-term care and healthcare facilities, as they were far too busy, quite frankly, closing them. 52 hospitals and pulled 1,200 long-term care beds from the provincial. Mr. Speaker, thankfully in 2009, these facilities received commitment from their newly elected government, and it was not a dream, as the NDP so callously suggested. Mr. Speaker, a little over a week ago, I had the opportunity with our Premier, our Minister of Health, our Minister of Rural and Remote Health, and my colleague from Saskatchewan Rivers to attend the grand opening of the Parkland Integrated Health Centre. This was one of those 13 facilities, and it was the first integrated facility with 34 long-term care beds, 20 acute care beds, a full complement of community services, and a fully functioning emergency department. It was noted by many in the region at this opening and in the days after, Mr. Speaker, how this new integrated facility would ensure that all the hospital and long-term care staff have an efficient workplace so that they may provide the very best care to the patients and residents within. And sadly, Mr. Speaker, just a couple of weeks ago, in a press release, the NDP were again not accurate with their statements. And I quote, "The government has already reduced hours and shut doors on emergency rooms in dozens of communities." That was the NDP government, Mr. Speaker. They closed the 52 hospitals and they pulled the 1,200 long-term care beds from the provincial system. The press release goes on to indicate that Shellbrook was one of the communities that faced closed emergency room doors and reduced medical services because of doctor shortages. Mr. Speaker, that emergency department is open, in part due to health ministers on this side that have made Saskatchewan's complement of medical professionals made efforts to build this Saskatchewan's complement of medical professionals. And Mr. Speaker, that emergency department is open in a new facility, in part due to this government's belief that hospital and long-term care facilities were necessary goals for the people of Saskatchewan and not just dreams. Mr. Speaker, it was the new NDP that denied provincial approval for these facilities while they were in government. It's the NDP that recently referred to Saskatchewan people's goals as dreams, and today it's the same old NDP that doesn't have their facts straight. Mr. Speaker, a little more relevant to the speech from the throne regarding CECs, or Collaborative Emergency Centres. And firstly, at the outset, I would like to take the opportunity to congratulate and thank the community of Maidstone, as well as all those involved from the Prairie North Health Region, the providers, on the opening of the very first Collaborative Emergency Centre in the province of Saskatchewan. This innovative approach to improve access to both primary health care and emergency services is a boost for rural communities, and it's something that they've asked for many years. This model also provides a framework of sustainable access for all our rural communities. In the coming months, other collaborative emergency centres will open in Shaunavon, Spiritwood, Waka and Kenora, goes the throne speech. Mr. Speaker, in 2006, under the NDP government, the facility in Spiritwood lost its emergency services. When this facility had a service disruption, there was an outreach from the community. They wanted to contact the NDP health minister of the day, Mr. Speaker, without success. This was indicative of how the NDP handled service disruptions in rural Saskatchewan, and that was quite simply just to ignore them. Make no mistake about it, Mr. Speaker, health facilities such as the one in Spiritwood offer an important service to the residents, not only from the community of Spiritwood, but all of the surrounding communities. And it's this present government, specifically the Minister of Health, along with the Minister of Rural and Remote Health, and their willingness to look at different initiatives and different models of care, such as a collaborative emergency centre, and this will provide access to emergency and primary health care services to all of our Saskatchewan communities. It's at this point, with the announcement of the additional sites for CECs, or collaborative emergency centres, that I thank the Prince Albert Health Authority for their support and acknowledge the health providers in Spiritwood for their support for the system. And I would also like to acknowledge the people from Spiritwood and the surrounding communities. They have worked so diligently over the past number of years to improve their recruitment and retention efforts in their community and also advocate for greater services. Your government's announcement of your collaborative emergency centre is a result of the commitment of individuals, and improved access of health care services in the communities around Spiritwood will be the result. Mr. Speaker, I would be remiss if I did not enter a few comments about agriculture. Rosthern-Shellbrook is a very diverse rural area, but there is no question that agricultural production, agricultural service, and agricultural processing industries make up a very large percentage of the economic activity in the area. And this, consequently, is also the case for our province of Saskatchewan. In 2012, Mr. Speaker, Saskatchewan exported just over $32 billion of exports. 11.2 billion of these exports were agricultural exports. 2012 was a record year for Saskatchewan ag exports. However, it should be noted that we're in a great position to add to these numbers in 2013. In 2013, in the first 6 months, our ag exports are up 13%. And this is with producers recently placing a very valuable crop in the bin and a value-added industry that is poised to expand. Mr. Speaker, if we're going to reach 9 billion people in this world, we're going to need to produce more food worldwide and here in Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan is poised to and will be required to be an integral agricultural producer and exporter to the world. And to enhance Saskatchewan's position in the world market, we need to continue to encourage our research and our innovation agendas. We need to ensure continued and expanded international market access for our producers and our exporters, and we need to increase the value of our agricultural products that we export. Mr. Speaker, the agricultural economy in Saskatchewan is extremely diverse. Many different eggs in many different baskets, if you will. It ranges from traditional crop production on numerous different crops destined for numerous different markets all around the world, each with a different processing option, many which take place right here in this province. We also have numerous different types of livestock, also which are destined for all over the world. The future is bright for food-producing nations, Mr. Speaker. Our agri-food industry in our province is in a great position to supply the world with the safe and sustainable food production system that we have become so well known for. Mr. Speaker, in Rosthern-Shellbrook, we had a busy spring with we had a large snow melt with a large runoff, and we had 10 to 12 inches of rain in May and June. And the result of that, Mr. Speaker, was we had a lot of roads that were washed out. I can think of one RM in particular that had in excess of 130 roads that were inaccessible. And I would like to just take a minute to recognize the rural and urban municipal councils and the effort that they gave this spring in putting their communities and their infrastructure back together. And I would also like to make note of programs such as the Provincial Disaster Assistance Program, Mr. Speaker, the FDRP program just to help a little bit with these communities as they put their infrastructure back together after the excess of moisture that we had this spring. Mr. Speaker, it's also been recently announced that Saskatchewan recently reached 1.1 million people. And many thought this achievement was not possible in this province. And the Saskatchewan Plan for Growth has recently set the population goal at 1.2 million people by the year 2020. It would be interesting to note if those same people that thought the first 100,000 wasn't possible, if they're on board for the second 100,000, whether they support that or not, Mr. Speaker.
Kind of quiet over there.
Rosthern-Shellbrook as I said, could be considered quite a rural constituency, but yet we've had significant population growth in Rosthern-Shellbrook, Mr. Speaker. After experiencing a decline in population during the census years of 2001 to 2006 of negative 10%, for example, the community of Hafford in the latest census recorded positive 10% growth. Mr. Speaker, those same years under the NDP, Rosthern was negative 8%. Now Rosthern is over 13% growth, Mr. Speaker. And the community that I live in, Mr. Speaker, in Shellbrook, under the NDP was negative 4.8% growth. Now 16.5% growth, Mr. Speaker. 20%. As a matter of fact, all of the towns in Rosthern-Shellbrook have experienced positive population growth in the last census. This is quite indicative of what's happening in the province, with 80% of our rural towns are now experiencing positive population growth, Mr. Speaker. And this is in stark contrast to just a few years ago. Saskatchewan, Mr. Speaker, is no longer closing schools. We are building them. Saskatchewan is no longer removing healthcare services and infrastructure. We are adding and we are investing in them. Saskatchewan is no longer nationalizing corporations. We are attracting companies and their investment. Saskatchewan, Mr. Speaker, is no longer attacking rural infrastructure and agriculture. We are most definitely investing in it. Saskatchewan is no longer the place where we manage for population decline. We're taking steps, some of them in this year's speech from the throne, to achieve the people's vision of Saskatchewan, Mr. Speaker, and that's the Saskatchewan Plan for Growth. Mr. Speaker, with those comments, I'll end my comments with regards to the speech from the throne, and I would like to indicate that I will not be supporting the amendment. I will be supporting the speech from the throne, moved by my colleague from Regina Dewdney, seconded by my colleague from Sutherland. Thank you.